Greetings and welcome, as today I go over the new Erratas, as well as the updated Forsaken and Restricted list, or FAR list, for Warhammer Underworlds, which was released in June 2021 on the Friday just gone past. Before we get into the video, please remember to like and subscribe, as well as comment as to what you thought of today's video, as well as what you may think the balance effects and changes will have on Warhammer Underworlds as a whole. So yeah, just let me know down in the comments below. If you prefer written content, I've also done this video as an article, which you can find in the episode description below. As previously mentioned, Games Workshop dropped new updates for the Errata Championship document, as well as a new FAR list for the Championship format. I'll be going over all of these changes in depth, covering the effects these will have on Warhammer Underworlds in general, as well as, cards you may want to run instead of the cards that have been restricted and forsaken. For the Championship document update, nothing too big here. The essential card pack has been officially recognised for Championship format, along with the Silent Menace cards. The boards from the starter set have been made legal too. The only oddity is no Penitent's Throne, despite the Amber Trap Nest being an exact recolor of it. The real mystery is the lack of a Vanguard format update. This means that Games Workshop intended for the essential card pack to not be legal for Vanguard format, as well as the starter set warbands. This also means that the Vanguard format has no Forsaken and Restricted list, which is a much worse outcome. Tournament organisers may want to at least adopt the current Forsaken and Restricted list for Vanguard, but it's strange this document saw no update at all. For new Erratas, to begin with, the first set of changes are 2 Erratas for 2 warbands. Mollog has a huge change with his Inspired ability being reworked entirely. Before, Mollog Inspired could make a charge action even if he had a charge token. Being able to double charge was always ridiculous and compiled on what made him such a huge problem to deal with. The new Errata alters Mollog's Inspired ability to still allow the Troggoth to make a move or charge action if he has a single move token, but while Mollog has a charge token, he cannot make super actions. This change completely stops Mollog Inspired from making 2 charges in a single action phase, as well as stopping him from making his Whirling Club attack action. While this attack action does not have the Scything keyword, it still is 2 or more actions during a single activation, which makes it count as a super action, although having an FAQ to clarify this would be great. Overall, this is amazing. Mollog loses a ton of pressure he didn't need. It means the Mollog player has to play slightly smarter with the Troggoth and make him less oppressive to play against. He is still a monster while inspired, but no longer game-breaking. The next errata is a beta rule. This is for Khagra's Ravagers. It changes their Inspire mechanic from needing 3 Desecration tokens to 2. While nice to see Games Workshop addressing the balance of underperforming warbands, this change does nothing to address the main issue of Khagra's Ravagers, the fact that their Desecration mechanic actively hurts the warband. The better change would be to allow them to hold objectives that have been desecrated. All this change will do is result in Khagra's Ravagers players making very unoptimal decisions in order to guarantee inspiration via digging for the Desecration faction Gambits, as well as leaving Razak and Kragan back on objectives to desecrate at the end of a round. However, the main interesting point of this is that Games Workshop is trying to buff underperforming warbands. Will we see the same for older Shadespire and Nightvault warbands, for example? Personally, I doubt it, and this is likely done because Khagra's Ravagers are a new Direchasm warband, and this change could be a result to improve sales for a warband, as there is no real financial benefit to improve older warbands that Games Workshop no longer sells. I could be wrong here, and it's all just guesswork on my part, but I sadly don't think we'll see any new errata buffs for older warbands. Now we come to the big topic, the new Forsaken and Restricted list. 23 cards hit will leave huge ramifications for Warhammer Underworlds' competitive balance. This is doubly so, considering this is one of the largest Forsaken and Restricted list hits we've seen in recent memory, but it makes sense when you consider that the last FAR has been slightly over 6 months ago. First up is our new Forsaken card, Ferocious Resistance. If you weren't aware of my thoughts and feelings on this card in my previous tier list ramblings with Mollog's power, Ferocious Resistance is a card that lets you roll a magic dice for each wound counter that chosen fighter has, as well as one additional magic dice if they have one or more hunger counters. For each roll of a channel, heal one that fighter. This potentially could heal Mollog, for example, from one wound all the way back up to full health. It was bonkers on fighters with more than 4 wounds. Utterly broken and glad to see it gone. The healing potential from this card was just too good and made warbands like Mollog's Mob feel absolutely broken. Another big takeaway from this is that core set cards can be Forsaken now. This is breaking new ground for Warhammer Underworlds, as it means nothing is safe when it comes to balance. Could we even see faction cards banned if the need arose? Now we look at the other 22 cards that have been restricted. First, I'll go over the universal cards, then I will cover the restricted faction cards. First up is Cover Ground. This is a surge you score for moving 6 or more hexes during a move action. Despite having to move 6 hexes, you can score this card by moving effectively 1 hex and running around in a circle, meaning you don't need to actually move 6 hexes away to score Cover Ground, only that your move action resulted in your fighter moving 6 hexes. This is different to how Gathered Momentum and Winged Death score for movement purposes. With all the +2 movement cards in the game right now, it is very easy to score Cover Ground without actually needing to get close to the opponent, and was likely the reason it was hit. Show of Force is another surge which you score for having 3 or more fighters in enemy territory, or having a fighter with 3 or more upgrades. What caused this card to be restricted is the latter scoring condition. Way too easy to score without needing to interact with the opponent, or giving them the right to respond and interrupt. Surge of Aggression is another surge and hybrid, which you score via either succeeding with an attack action that is doing 4 or more damage, or you gain the Primacy token. This was likely restricted to tone down Primacy as well as Mollog. Cards that give the Primacy token for free also made Surge of Aggression problematic as well. For restricted Gambits, Mischievous Spirits is a card that allows players, taking in turn starting with the controller of the card, to move each objective token 1 hex. The reason this was restricted was because it basically killed hold objective play. Aggro players could easily slot this card in to shut down the end phase of a hold objective player, as it takes 2 to 3 push cards for the hold objective player to counter Mischievous Spirits. Great to see it finally restricted. Slick Rock is a trap card with the reaction of after an enemy fighter's move action that ends on an objective token. Scatter that fighter 1 hex. This card messed up Bold Conquest and hold objective surge objectives. Honestly, this is a strange hit. No one was really using this card, and Slick Rock is easy to recover from. Hurting surge hold objectives is actually a good thing. Mischievous Spirits was the big problem, so I feel this restriction is overkill. For restricted upgrades, Amber Bone Sword is another odd restriction. This upgrade is range 1, 3 smash and 2 damage. On a successful kill, you can discard this card to gain an additional glory. Amberbone Mace being restricted is good. This card being restricted is just strange. I can see why it may need to have been hit, but this wasn't really a problem card. Crown of the Dead is a Mortis relic, which lets you spend 1 glory after an activation to draw 2 power cards and then discard 1. Plus, if you have 2 or more equipped Mortis relics, it has an awakened weapon effect. This card was restricted because it is a silly Mortis relic, in addition to having an amazing card draw effect. Deserved Confidence is an upgrade from Arena Mortis. This card has varying cumulative effects, depending on how many upgrades the fighter has. For 3 or more, that fighter has +1 wounds and cannot be driven back. 5 or more give +1 move, and 9 or more grant an innate smash and fury. The stacking effect is crazy good, and the first option gives way too much, especially to Mollog. Gauntlet of Command is another Mortis relic, which has a reaction that lets you spend 1 glory after the equipped fighter's activation to push an enemy fighter 1 hex. It also grants +1 wounds for having 2 or more Mortis relics on a single fighter. Both these effects are too strong currently and resulted in it being restricted. Gauntlet of Command is basically Distraction and Great Fortitude rolled into a single card after all. Geomancer's Gauntlet grants an action to flip all feature tokens within 1 hex. Thanks to cards that move feature tokens, a fighter could flip 2 or more at once. This upgrade made Feed the Beastgrave far too efficient, so I can see why it ended up being restricted. Haughty Resistance is a reaction that gives you the primacy token after an attack action targets this equipped fighter, or discard the primacy token if you already have it to reduce damage taken by 1. Once again, this was amazing for Mollog and any other durable fighter, a reliable way to get primacy as well as built-in damage negation too. Hunter's Talisman is a Beastgrave upgrade which gives +1 dice for a hunter. You also get to reroll a single dice against a quarry. Crazy with Hrothgorn, but Hunter's Talisman is amazing aggro accuracy that wasn't needed in an already strong aggro meta. Proud Runner gives you +1 move and grants you the primacy token after a move action of 5 or more hexes away from where you started. If you have no move or charge tokens on this equipped fighter at the end of the action phase, you discard the primacy token. This upgrade basically was way too easy and reliable for getting the primacy token, especially considering it did not have to be a charge action and most fighters are movement 4 base now. Savage Visage makes the equipped fighter a hunter and lets you reroll 1 dice for range 1 attack actions for each instance that the upgrade has the hunter keyword on an equipped fighter. Once again, more accuracy for range 1 aggro warbands, as it is very easy to get rerolls for 2 or more attack dice in Direchasm. Sting of the Urgrub is an Urgrub aspect card which gives +1 damage to range 1 attack actions and can turn your equipped fighter into the avatar of the Urgrub if they have all 3 Urgrub aspect cards. This was also restricted to tone down the power of range 1 warbands, as Warhammer Underworlds currently has a surplus of +1 damage upgrades. Substance Siphon changes the fighter's defense characteristic to dodge and the value to the round number. The defense characteristic cannot be modified or rerolled, however you can still benefit from being on guard. This is another odd hit which seems to be due to Mollog again, who only has a single defense dice. Geez, Mollog really did upset somebody. Poor Wormspat though. For restricted faction cards, Fleeting Memory is a faction objective for Lady Harrow's Mournflight, which is a surge that grants 1 glory after a move action where a fighter entered 2 or more objective hexes. This basically hits more of the uninteractive surge glory that the Mournflight can easily farm from at the back of the board alone. Cruel Hunters is a dual objective for Ripper's Snarlfangs, which gives them 2 glory for having 2 or more enemy fighters out of action and 1 or more friendly fighters in enemy territory. This is a very good faction upgrade for Ripper's Snarlfangs, but I'm still a little surprised this was restricted. Either way, it helps tone down the power of this warband in terms of its reliable end phase glory. Arm of the Everwinter is a surge objective for Hrothgorn's Mantrappers, which is scored when the warband removes or flips a feature token. Another odd hit, mainly to damage Feed the Beastgrave builds for Hrothgorn's Mantrappers, but that wasn't the most optimal build for the Mantrappers anyway. Feed the Beastgrave should have been restricted instead, but it is what it is. Got It Boss is a surge objective for Morgoth's Crushers, which gives them 1 glory for holding an objective in enemy territory. This was the wrong objective to hit. Now What, which is Faction Hidden Purpose, is a more problematic card, and at least Got It Boss forces the Crushers player to engage and place an objective in enemy territory. This was likely restricted to tone down the warband's hold objective build, which sat at the back and relied on passive cards and easy surges. Berserk Fortitude is another Morgoth's Crusher card that is a reaction which reduces the damage taken by discarding war counters. Surprise damage negation on 5 wound based fighters is too good. Glad to see it restricted to help mitigate the amazing durability that Morgoth's Crushers already has. Foul Temper is Faction Awakened Weapon for Mollog's mob. Mollog loses even more accuracy, and this will make piloting him far more difficult, on top of all the new universal card restrictions. Now I'll cover cards that should have been restricted. Thankfully there aren't many at all, but there are still some which are worth mentioning. The biggest one is Gathered Momentum. This is a surge and hybrid objective you score by either making a charge action of 5 or more hexes further away from where you started, or by scoring your second or subsequent surge objective this phase. This is equally as bad as Cover Ground, and a lot of warbands don't even need card investment to score this. This is not even to mention its also other very easy scoring condition. Still baffled how Gathered Momentum has survived over 2 years without being restricted. Feed the Beastgrave is 5 glory for having no objective tokens on the battlefield. Note, I would have still kept the feature token flip cards that have already been restricted, but it is odd that the card which causes the playstyle to become a problem in the first place was not touched. you could have even prevented Arm of the Everwinter from being restricted too. Great Strength, +1 damage to range 1 and 2 attack actions. Now hear me out. Yes, this is an essential card pack card, but Daylight Robbery is restricted too as well. Restricting this upgrade would be more beneficial than hitting faction Great Strengths, as well as similar cards such as Savage Strength, which has a natural downside. Restricting Great Strength would just be so beneficial for the game overall, especially as cards like Glory Seeker are back in play. Punching Up, it chooses the fighter with the lowest wounds characteristic and grants them +1 dice and damage to range 1 and 2 attack actions in the next activation. This was likely not restricted due to being released after this FAR was finalized in May 2021. Still, this is a future card that will cause problems. It's already amazing in Kanan's Reapers and just offers too much of a buff with 2 wound fighters. Punching Up gets pretty crazy on their Nadirite attack actions, as well as with general universal upgrades such as Soultooth Dagger. This Forsaken and Restricted list has been one of the most extensive we have had in a long time, with 23 cards being hit in total. Now I'll briefly go over some cards that will serve as good replacements in the meantime while the dust settles. First up is Gathered Momentum. I've already explained why this card is so strong, so just run it if you're missing out on cover ground being restricted. Winged Death is also a good replacement as it still meets the 6 hex requirement, although with the same wording as Gathered Momentum for scoring purposes. Healing Potion doesn't need much explaining. The Shadespire Classic still offers reliable healing, especially for players who are now missing Ferocious Resistance. Augmented Limbs is a great replacement for range 1 aggro players. This upgrade makes you a quarry and gives you +1 dice to range 1 attack actions. Use it while it remains unrestricted. For the Errata and Forsaken list overview, overall I really like this new Forsaken and Restricted list, as well as the new Errata. Sure, there are still some stuff that needed to be hit, but most of the problematic cards and warbands have been hit. This new Forsaken and Restricted list is way better than the last one we had way back in December 2020. Plus, praises for Games Workshop must be given, as they did not wait for rotation to try and fix things like they did with the end of Beastgrave. People upset at cards being hit while not being able to use them is understandable, but there are a lot of people who are playing again and have been playing Warhammer Underworlds over the past 6 months, but like via either online such as with webcam format. It does suck a bit for people who have been unable to play, but at least we can take from this that Games Workshop still cares about Warhammer Underworlds' balance. Big losers from the change is Mollog. This Troggoth got hit hard, maybe a little too hard. Either way, Mollog definitely isn't S tier anymore. Thankfully, the fearful effect he has had on Warhammer Underworlds is now toned down. He isn't menacing the game, but he will still be a problem you need to keep in mind instead of constantly worrying about. Sadly, some warbands also suffer from the fallout of these new restrictions. These are namely the weaker range 1 aggro warbands like Elethane Soul Raid and other warbands like the Wormspat who cry at the restriction of Substance Siphon. A shame to see, but these kind of eventualities always happen post Forsaken and Restricted list updates. Upgrade stacking has also been severely hit. Pretty much all the good upgrades from Arena Mortis have been restricted. For now, cards like Savage Soldier and the Silent Relics remain untouched, but the question is for how long. Primacy and range 1 aggro has taken hits too in terms of consistency and damage. Not enough to tone them down completely, but still sufficient to make these feel not so free to run without any cost. You'll probably still likely take Proud Runner, but Augmented Limbs will likely take the place of cards such as Savage Visage if they haven't already. The largest oddity is the lack of an accompanying FAQ. A balance update is amazing to have, but there still are a lot of important questions that need answering, like the order you gain the primacy token after an activation, as well as fighter and card interactions. For example, I expect the Mollog inspired with a charge token and making his Whirling Club attack action to cause a lot of arguments. One last thing was the lack of Vanguard format update. No one will know the truth outside of Games Workshop, but it is strange to see silence on this new format. although it is fair to say that Alliance format saw no update either. Big winners are hold objective players. Now they have a chance to actually stand on objectives in the end phase and score objectives such as supremacy. Hopefully we can see this playstyle rise up to relevance again after being overwhelmed with Direchasm aggro love. For the closing crit, there we have it for the June 2021 Forsaken and Restricted List update, along with the new Errata update for Warhammer Underworlds. As I have said previously, this is a great change for the game. There were a lot of upsets for multiple players, playstyles and warbands. Exactly how a typical Forsaken and Restricted List update should go. The only thing I want now is a new FAQ. Please Games Workshop, you're our only hope. So until next time, remember to update your card folders and keep rolling crits.